The twin suns hung low in the orange sky as Jace stepped into the slave district of Varnock Prime. His boots crunched against dust and broken glass. The air thick with the stench of oil, sweat, and fear. He didn't want to be here, but something inside him had pulled him toward this place like gravity. The market was loud, cruel, and alive with misery. Shackled beings from different worlds sat in metal cages or behind shimmering energy walls. Their eyes dull and empty, vendors shouted prices like they were selling fruit. 300 credits for the feathered one, trained for song and silence. 250 for the twin-mouthed crawler entertainment, guaranteed. Jace ignored them, walking past as fast as he could without drawing attention. But then he heard something, a whisper, barely a breath. Please, he stopped. It didn't sound like begging, not like the others. It sounded tired, but sharp. Like someone still holding on to a single broken piece of hope. He turned and saw her. In the farthest corner, near a rusted trash vent, was a small cage covered in shadow. Inside sat a female alien with silver hair that hung in tangled strands. Her skin was pale, glowing faintly, but smudged with bruises and grime. A thin metal collar blinked red around her neck, and thick chains wrapped around her wrists and ankles. A sign was burned into the wall above her. Pleasure animal, untamed, half-pricey, didn't cry or scream. She only looked at him, eyes too large for her face, glowing violet in the dark. And when their eyes met, she didn't flinch or look away. Instead, she whispered again, "Take me home." Well, Jace felt something crack inside him. He had seen war, death, and all the worst sides of the galaxy, but this felt personal. He stepped forward, ignoring the warning signs around her cage. A thick-scaled merchant with yellow teeth stepped in front of him. "Bad choice, human," the creature hissed. "She's not like the others. Doesn't speak, doesn't obey. Nothing but trouble." "She just spoke to me," Jace replied, his voice cold. "She's broken goods." The merchant sneered. "Useless for service, worse for pleasure. Even other buyers won't take her." Jace looked at her again. She hadn't moved, hadn't begged, just sat there. Waiting. That whisper haunted his ears. "Take me home. Not save me, not help me. Just take me." "How much?" Jace asked, pulling out his credit card. The merchant laughed. Thinking the human was joking, 50 credits, and she's yours. "But I warned you she's cursed." Jace transferred the payment without a second thought. The collar beeped, the chains loosened slightly, but didn't fall away completely. The merchant handed him a chipped control remote. "She'll follow you, but the collar is locked to your ID. Now she's your problem if she bites someone." Jace stepped forward and knelt by the cage. She still hadn't moved. He reached out slowly. Not to grab her, but to offer his hand, like you would to a wounded animal. Her eyes dropped to his hand, then rose again to meet his gaze. "Can you stand?" he asked gently. She didn't answer. Instead, she leaned forward, grabbed the bars of her cage, and pulled herself up. Her legs trembled. Muscles clearly weak from hunger or worse. Jace pressed a button on the cage, and the lock hissed open. As the door swung out, she stumbled and nearly fell. He caught her before she hit the ground. Her body was ice cold. He could feel the outline of bones under her skin. Still, she didn't cry, didn't thank him. She just whispered again, even quieter, "Take me home." The walk back to the ship was heavy, not because of distance, but because of stares. Everyone in the market stopped what they were doing. A human walking beside her, she limped slightly, silent and expressionless, but still holding onto the edge of his coat like a child afraid to let go. Jace didn't speak either. He felt the judgment in every whisper around them. Why that one did he lose a bet? She's not even fully trained. When they reached the city's exit checkpoint, the guards scanned her collar and raised their weapons. "Hold there, human," one barked. "State your purpose with this." Unit Jace showed the receipt, but the guard's gaze didn't soften. It's classified under Category 9 Biological Pleasure Constructs. "Non-sentient," the officer said. "You understand she has no rights, no records, and any damage she causes is on your name." "She's not a construct," Jace replied. "She's a person." The guard smirked, tapping the scanner on her collar. "No registry, no ID, no planet of origin, no clan cheese, officially, nothing." "She's mine," Jace said firmly. The guard hesitated, then backed off. "Your funeral," he muttered, and waved them through. Inside the ship, the door sealed shut with a hiss. Cutting off the noise of the world outside, Jace sighed, rubbing his temples. He turned toward her, ready to speak, but stopped. She had dropped to her knees just inside the doorway, head bowed, trembling slightly. "Hey," he said gently, walking over, "you don't need to kneel." No answer. He crouched in front of her, and only then realized she wasn't kneeling. From habit, she was afraid to step farther in, like she didn't think she belonged. "This isn't a cage," Jace whispered. "It's just a ship." Still, she didn't move. So Jace stood, took 2 slow steps back, then held out his hand again. "Come," he said. "Okay. Just take 1 step inside, Kara." She looked up sharply. He had remembered her name. For a moment, she just stared, like she was trying to decide if this was a trap. Then, with a deep, shaky breath, she reached out and touched his hand. 1 step, then 2. And just like that, she was inside. The ship wasn't luxurious, just a small freighter meant for cargo, but it was clean and quiet. Jace led her to a soft chair, guiding her to sit. She winced as her chains dragged across the floor. Still attached to her wrists, he tapped a few buttons on the control panel. Activating the collar's permissions, the shackles beeped and clicked open. Falling to the floor with a clank, Kara stared at her bare wrists like she didn't know what freedom looked like. "Here," Jace said, handing her a warm blanket and a protein bar. She took the blanket with both hands, clutching it tightly, but she didn't touch the food. "You're safe now," he added. "Eat." Kara finally looked at the food, then at him. She shook her head slowly. "You eat first," she whispered. Jace frowned, confused. "You think it's poisoned?" he asked. She nodded, ashamed. Jace opened another protein bar, took a bite, and chewed. "No poison," he said with a weak smile, "just dry and tasteless." Kara watched him a moment longer before she slowly opened hers and began to nibble. It was probably the first time in months she had eaten without being watched like an animal. Jace sat beside her, not asking anything, just letting her breathe. Her body curled smaller under the blanket, her eyes fluttering shut like a child after crying. She was asleep within minutes. Still holding the uneaten half of the bar, Jace stood and walked to the cockpit. He looked out the window, not at the stars but at his reflection. He didn't plan to bring her, didn't know what came next. But one thing was clear, wasn't an object, and no matter what they had done to her, she deserved more than chains. Kara woke in the middle of the night, her heart racing. She had dreamed she was still in the cage, still cold and watched, still chained and forgotten. But when her eyes opened, she wasn't there. She was in a small room with soft light and warm air, wrapped in a thick blanket, lying on a real bed. The soft hum of the ship filled the silence, and for the first time in a long time, no one was watching her, or so she thought. Jace sat outside the doorway, not sleeping either. He wasn't guarding her, he was just there. He had placed water on the table near her bed, along with more food, and a folded towel beside the bathroom door, in case she wanted to wash, but she hadn't moved. She was still afraid to do anything without being told. That's how it was in the cages. If you moved without permission, you were punished. She curled tighter under the blanket, but her body was burning inside. Not from fever, but from something worse: shame, confusion, and something like hope. A feeling she didn't understand anymore. She sat up slowly, gripping the blanket, and looked toward Jace. He was staring out into space, elbows resting on his knees. She walked toward him without sound, stopping just behind the door. "You're not asleep," she said softly. Jace turned his head slightly, surprised. She spoke. "I figured you wouldn't be either," he said gently. "First night's the hardest." Kara stood there a moment, then stepped forward and sat across from him on the floor. She didn't know why. Maybe it was because he hadn't touched her without asking. Maybe because he hadn't asked for anything at all. "Are you going to sell me?" she asked suddenly. Jace looked at her in shock. "No," he said firmly. "Never." She nodded slowly, like she didn't fully believe it. "Most of them say that," she whispered, "before they find a better price." "I didn't buy you to own you," Jace replied. "I bought you so no one else would." Kara blinked hard, her hands tightening on the blanket. That wasn't how it was supposed to go. Men who bought girls like her had plans, expectations. But Jace just gave her water and food and silence. No orders, no collars, no chains. "Do you want to know my name?" she asked carefully. "I already do," Jace said with a faint smile. Kara, her breath caught. He remembered even when she was in the cage, even when her voice was barely a whisper, he had listened. That made something warm grow behind her chest, painful but good. She touched her own shoulder, like checking if she was still real. "I haven't said it in years," she admitted. "Most just call me it or thing." Jace leaned back and looked at her directly. "You're not a thing," he said. "You're Kara." She stared at him for a long moment, then asked something she never dared before. "Can I wash?" Jace nodded immediately and stood, showing her the door nearby. He didn't follow her in, didn't watch her. Just placed the towel outside the door and stepped away. That alone nearly broke her. No leering eyes, no commands, just freedom, simple and soft, inside the tiny bathroom. She removed the worn clothing. The mirror showed her a figure she barely recognized. Bruises, scars, old burns, evidence of everything they'd done. But beneath it all, she could still see the girl she once was. A warrior's daughter, not a slave. She washed slowly, as if afraid the warm water might disappear. When she came out, hair dripping, the towel wrapped around her thin frame, Jace had left a fresh shirt and pants on the bed. Not silk, not change, just soft cotton. She put them on and sat again in the chair. Jace returned from the cockpit, holding 2 warm cups of broth. He handed one to her and sat beside her again. No questions, no pressure, just 2 people sharing. Quiet. She looked down at the cup in her hands, then up at him, and for the first time she said something without fear. "Thank you." It was small, but real. And Jace nodded, sipping his drink. "You're welcome, Kara." The stars blurred past the window like streaks of rain. Kara sat near the glass, her hand pressed softly against it. It was the first time she'd seen space from anywhere other than a cage. No bars in front of her, no handlers behind her. Just the cold beauty of the void and the warmth of the ship behind her. But the collar was still there, around her neck. It blinked faint red, not locked anymore, but still present a reminder. She reached up and touched it, fingers trembling. It didn't burn like it used to, but it still made her feel like a thing. Not a person. Jace walked in quietly, carrying 2 data pads. He handed one to her without a word and sat on the floor beside her. Kara glanced at it, confused. It showed a map, a star chart, hundreds of routes, blinking dots, and unknown names. "What is this?" she asked softly. "Places we could go," Jace replied. "Planets where slavery is banned, or where medical tech is better, or where records are lost." She looked at him in shock. "You want to hide me?" Jace shook his head. "No," he said. "I want to give you choices." That word choices felt strange in her mouth. "I don't know what to choose," she admitted. "Then we'll figure it out together," he said gently. "You don't have to decide today." Kara lowered her eyes, her fingers brushing the screen. She didn't understand how this man could care when others hadn't. She had seen humans before, greedy, worse than the slavers, but Jace was different. Suddenly, the ship jolted, alarms blaring. Red lights flashed across the ceiling. Jace sprang up and ran to the controls. "Pirate scan just tagged us," he shouted, fast movers armed. Kara stood frozen in the middle of the room. She had heard that sound before, just before being taken the first time. Her breathing became sharp, memories flooding back, flashing lights, yelling, being dragged by the hair. Her mother's scream. The first time the collar was put on. "Kara, get down," Jace yelled, pulling her behind a panel as the ship shook again. Lasers hit the hull and sparks flew from the console. Jace worked quickly, flipping switches, rerouting power. He turned to her, eyes serious. "I need you to crawl under that bench and stay there." Kara shook her head. "No, don't leave me." "I'm not leaving. I'm flying," he said with a short breath. "But I need you safe." She hesitated, then obeyed. Crawling into the small space with her arms over her head, the ship turned sharply, gravity pulling her sideways. Outside, she could hear the distant booms of return, Fire Jace fighting back. Fighting for her, the battle lasted less than 3 minutes. Jace outmaneuvered them, slamming on the emergency booster and diving through a nearby asteroid field when the final blast shook the ship and then stopped. Silence followed, and Kara peeked out slowly. He was still there, covered in sweat, one arm burned, but alive. Are we safe?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Yeah," he said, leaning back, "for now." Kara rushed forward, surprising even herself, and grabbed his arm. "You stayed," she said, as if it were the most shocking thing in the world. "Of course I stayed," Jace answered, confused. "You fought for me," she whispered. "You risked everything." He looked her in the eye and said something that made her breath catch. "You're not cargo, Kara," he said. "You're not a thing." The words hit her harder than the blasts had. Tears slipped down her face before she could stop them. She had been told she was nothing for so long that part of her had believed it. But in that moment, burned, shaking, and breathless, she believed him. Jace pulled a small tool from his belt. "Do you want this off?" he asked, nodding to the collar. Kara hesitated, then slowly nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Please." He pressed the tool to the collar's lock. Sparks flared. There was a loud click. Then the weight on her neck vanished. The collar dropped to the floor with a metallic clatter. Kara stared down at it, then touched her own throat with trembling hands. For the first time in years, her neck felt light. She looked up at Jace, who said nothing. He didn't celebrate, didn't joke, just watched her with quiet respect. And Kara finally took a deep breath, one not controlled by fear, one not owned by pain. She was more than a thing, and for the first time in a very long time, she believed she could become someone again. The stars above Zero Tau looked colder than Kara remembered. They blinked like eyes, too afraid to look down at what had been done below. But Kara no longer bowed her head, not to the silence, not to the ghosts, not even to the ruins of her people. She stood tall in the middle of a shattered city, with Jace beside her and her past beneath her feet. They had gathered the fragments of her old home. Carved stones, burned fabrics, symbols once sacred. And she carried them all in a simple bag slung over her shoulder, not because she wanted to take the past with her, but because she needed proof it existed. Jace contacted an old friend through encrypted signal, a doctor and engineer named Velen. He was known in the outer systems for removing slave implants and collars. A rebel who operated in secret. Someone trusted by no one except those who had lost everything. He answered with one look at Kara through the screen. "Bring her," he said. Now, they traveled to a rogue station hidden in a nebula inside. Kara found others like her. Former slaves, former weapons. Former nothings now rebuilding lives in secret. They stared at her when she walked in. Some whispered, some turned away, but a few looked at her with quiet recognition. "She has the mark," an older alien woman said, pointing to Kara's wrist where the old burn had scarred over. Kara's eyes widened. "You know this?" The woman nodded slowly. "I saw that crest when I was a girl. Before my ship was taken, before the cages." Kara's heart raced. She wasn't the only one who remembered. Velen met them in a quiet room, sterile and dimly lit. He studied Kara's neck, frowning at the embedded wiring beneath her skin. "This isn't just a collar," he said. "It's a control node, can override your nervous system if activated." Jace clenched his fists. They installed that in her. Kara sat still, her voice steady. "Can you remove it?" Velen nodded. "It won't be painless, but yes," she didn't hesitate. "Do it." The procedure took 3 hours. Kara didn't scream, not once. She gripped the edge of the table, her breath sharp, sweat running down her spine. But she endured it, because this was the final chain, the one buried deep not just in skin, but in memory. When it was over, Velen dropped a small chip on the metal tray. "It's out," he said. "You're free." She sat up slowly, touching her neck. There was pain. But more than that, there was silence. No more humming signal. No more electric vibration waiting to paralyze her. She was truly herself again. Jay stepped forward with a clean cloth and wrapped it gently around her neck. Kara looked at him, eyes wet but shining with strength. "No more collars," she said. "Never again," he answered. Word spread fast across the station. The girl from Zaratal, the warrior's daughter, had returned. Some approached her to speak, others simply nodded with respect. One child, a hybrid species barely past toddler age, walked up and touched her hand. "You're pretty," she said. "Are you a queen?" Kara knelt down, smiling softly. "No," she said, "but maybe one day." That night, Jace found her on the top deck of the station, looking out into the stars. Kara sat at the center of Jace's ship, a fire in her eyes. The collar was gone, but the ghost of it still burned around her neck each time she touched the skin. Where it once clung, her fingers twitched. Jace watched from a distance, not interrupting. He had learned something important. He didn't need to fix her. He only needed to stay that night. Kara asked him a question she never thought she'd ask anyone. "Can you help me find where I came from?" Jace blinked, surprised. "I thought your records were wiped," he said gently. "They were," she replied. "But I remember things they couldn't take." She closed her eyes, then began to speak. "There was a mountain with blue leaves, always raining, always warm. There was a song, sung before sleep, words I don't remember, but the melody won't leave me, and a mark. On my wrist, they burned it off, but I remember the shape." Jace listened, recording every detail into his datapad. Then, slowly, he pulled up an ancient database, one no longer used by the newer systems. "Let's start with the mountain," he said. "Show me what you saw in your mind." Together, they traced images, compared weather cycles, and matched planetary biospheres. Hours passed like minutes, and finally, they found a Machazoradal Prime, a world bombed during the Galactic Expansion Wars, now considered uninhabitable. "That's it," Kara whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "That was home." Jace frowned, reading more. The planet was marked as cleansed. All life terminated by orbital strikes. Kara stood slowly, her knees weak. "They erased us," she said. "Not just enslaved us, but made us vanish." Jace's jaw clenched. "That's genocide." he muttered, and they buried it. Like it never happened, she turned to him, her voice suddenly cold but steady. Then I'm proof they failed. That night, Kara walked the corridors of the ship barefoot. Listening to her own footsteps, she wasn't a ghost. Not anymore. She existed, she breathed, she remembered, even if her people were gone. Their blood still moved through her. She found Jace working on the engine, arms covered in grease, sweat glistening on his brow. I want to go there, she said, to Zeratal. Case looked up at her. It's not safe, he warned. Radiation. Zones, rogue drones, old traps no one's been back in decades. I don't care, Kara said. I want to stand on the soil they said doesn't exist. He looked at her eyes glowing with a new strength. Not survival, not fear, but defiance. All right. Jace said softly, we go together. The journey took 5 days across uncharted space. During those days, Kara began training again. She asked Jace for weights, for balance drills. Her body was still weak, but her spirit was rising like a flame. Each day she pushed herself harder. Each night, Jace sat nearby, guiding her breathing, watching her grow stronger, not into what she was forced to be, but into who she once chose to be. Finally, the ship dropped out of hyperspace. Zeratal floated before them, scarred, lifeless, silent. Its once blue oceans were ash-gray now, its forests gone, burned to dust. But Kara stepped forward to the glass and whispered, I remember this sky. They landed near what used to be a village. Now, only bones of buildings remained. Blackened ruins sleeping under the stars. Kara walked slowly through the remains. Picking up a scorched piece of stone, she turned it in her hands and smiled. Faintly, beneath the burn marks, a carving remained. The same shape she remembered on her wrist, a warrior's crest, the sigil of her house. She fell to her knees, and this time she cried not from pain, but from knowing Jace knelt beside her, saying nothing, and Kara whispered, they tried to erase us, but they failed. She placed the stone on her heart. I remember my name now, she said. Not the one they gave me in chains, but the one my mother whispered in our home. Jace looked at her. What is it? Karavi Toshin, she said proudly. Daughter of fire, last of Zeratal. He nodded slowly, and in that moment, the galaxy changed not for the stars, but for one forgotten girl, who remembered and refused to be forgotten again. You know, she said quietly, I used to dream of space. When I was in the cage, I dreamed it was big enough to lose myself in. Jace stepped beside her, arms crossed, still want to disappear. She shook her head. No, she said. Now I want to be seen. He smiled. So? What now? Kara looked at him, the wind of the recycled air blowing her silver hair back. We find more like me, she said. We help them take their chains off too. Jace nodded. And where do you want to call home? Kara didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached out, gently took his hand, and said, wherever I can stand without fear. And for the first time, she wasn't dreaming of space to run away. She was dreaming of building something new, not as property, not as a prisoner, but as Kara Toshin, the girl who broke the chain inside her soul. The engines of Jace's ship hummed quietly, ready for launch. Inside the docking bay of the rebel station, people moved like shadows. But the attention wasn't on them anymore. It was on her. Kara stood at the foot of the ship's ramp. Not as a rescued slave, not as a survivor, but as someone reborn. She wore a new set of clothes, simple, functional, clean. Her posture had changed. No longer bent from fear. No collar, no chains, no hesitation. But there was one final decision left. Jace waited inside the open hatch, glancing out at her. He had said nothing since they packed their supplies. He didn't ask if she'd come with him. He didn't beg, or assume, or plead. Because now she would choose. Kara stood still for a long time. Looking back at the people on the station, they had started whispering her name. She had become a symbol without meaning, to prove that the broken could heal. And yet, in the middle of all the respect and hope, she felt something was missing. She turned and looked at the ship, at him. Jace had never once tried to fix her. He had simply walked beside her, even when she couldn't stand. And when no one else heard her whisper, he had. Her eyes met his from across the bay, and with no words, no announcement, she stepped forward, one step, then another, until she stood at the top of the ramp, looking him straight in the eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, but she raised her hand and whispered the words that had started it all. "Take me home." But this time, it wasn't a plea, it was a promise. She wasn't asking to be rescued. She was choosing where she belonged. Jace smiled, but his voice cracked slightly. "Anywhere in the galaxy you want, Kara." She looked past him into the ship, then back at the stars. "I don't mean a planet," she said. "I mean here, with you." The door closed behind them, the ship lifting gently from the dock as they broke free into space. Kara sat beside him in the cockpit. Her hand hovered near the controls. "Curious, hesitant, want to fly?" he asked. "I've never tried," she replied. He smiled. Then, "It's about time." Her fingers touched the control wheel, unsure at first, but steadier with each second. The ship responded smoothly, dancing between stars like it knew her touch for the first time. She was not being moved, she was moving. They traveled for hours in silence, stars streaming by like dreams. Jace broke it gently. "So," he asked, "what should we do now?" Kara didn't answer right away. Instead, she stood up, walked to the window, and stared into the galaxy. "There are others," she said, "still in cages, still forgotten." She turned, her eyes glowing like fire. "Let's find them." Jace nodded without hesitation. "And when we do," Kara stepped closer. "We don't just free them," she said. "We believe in them." And with that, a mission was born, not of war, not of revenge, but of healing, rescue, and something even rarer in a galaxy so cruel, humanity in time. Their names would become legend: Kara, the Storm Daughter, and the human who heard her. Together, they crossed borders, broke chains, and rewrote laws that once marked people like her as property. She had once been silenced, bought, broken, but now, her voice was the first thing others heard when they awoke from their chains, and when they asked, "Who are you?" she would smile and answer, "I was once like you, until someone took me home."